You are now listening to Out of the Blank.
Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Paige Vaccaro.
Hey, how's it going?
Paige, tell me a little bit about yourself and if you want, what you do professionally.
I guess the most obvious thing about me to most people is that I have 4 kids, so that keeps me pretty busy in and of itself. But let's see, my background is I'm an educator. I taught for 12 years in public schools in Baltimore, Brooklyn, Maryland, Newark. Brooklyn, Baltimore, Newark, and also in Monmouth County, New Jersey. And then about in 2016, I founded a nonprofit organization called C.R.O.P.S. And that's pretty much what I do full time, even though it doesn't pay anything right now. But yeah, that's what I do.
So still kind of educating, but in a different basis.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what
Absolutely.
exactly does C.R.O.P.S stand for and what exactly does C.R.O.P.S do?
Um, when I founded C.R.O.P.S, I wanted to create an umbrella organization for all the ideas I had, which is, I needed a really big umbrella. So the name, I think, I've been growing into it, and I think now we finally fulfill it. So it stands for Communities Revolutionizing Open Public Spaces. So the idea is when I moved down to South Jersey, I'm a Long Islander, which is in New York, for those of you tuning in from not the tri-state area. So I moved down I went to Rutgers, and then after that I did Teach for America in Baltimore City. And so I spent a lot of time in urban areas, but a lot of times cities, it's difficult to start businesses in big cities because it costs so much money to start up anything or to even find a place that's available. But Atlantic County is not like that. It's really poor. And when I moved here, it had the highest foreclosure rate in the entire country. So to me, I was looking around and people were so depressed and like, wow, this area is really hit hard by opioid abuse and poverty all across the board. But what I saw was like all these like spaces that nobody knew what to do with them, buildings that were just vacant, parking lots that were covered in weeds. And what I saw was an opportunity to have more parks, more gardens, more community events. And that's pretty much where the idea was born.
And it kind of seems like I've always talked about how people nowadays they're not really a community anymore. It's more like their own private thing. Even with their family, they're not even being the community aspect of having a family. All these community events you would see when it comes to older generations, maybe doing them still, and adults, but kids, all these other things. Obviously, it's the separation point in life that you want to get away from your parents, you want to get away from your family. But even adults were starting to pick up these trends because in the world today, as much as we like to say technology has made us more connected than ever, it's not the right way. It's a very, very false connectivity. I always talk about it's like you start to notice people give you default answers in life, like how's your day going, but not truly caring about you anymore. Um, it's really, really like I call it a cold world. And I've talked about for man, since I started this podcast in the beginning about the communication aspect, and the only time people ever get together to truly care about one another is when there's like a terroristic attack or something that threatens all of us to the point where we're like, we need to step up and we need to take this thing down, such as like with the corona thing that's going on. I don't want to really harp on that because I know it's on everybody's mind, but people are starting to be like, it's gotten us to connect together. It's gotten us to realize how important people are. And it's like, it was there all along, but it
Yeah.
had to take something like this for that to occur. People are afraid to step outside of their homes, but you're seeing people become like very, very beneficial in some ways. It is a little bit false. What I call by false is like, I mean, I'm only 22, but just through observing so much and talking to so many people, when I say that this little helping thing that's going on is false, is because it's just people that are trying to get attention and glorified for their actions of helping. And that's not everybody, but it's most of the people out there. They want to show people like, hey, I'm going to help out these people. It's like you could have had that chance to help out those people before the sickness, before they had to go and
Right.
do this. But
Right.
it only took this, and they want to get the eye of the public to see, like, it's like a good deed, like when you donate to charity or something at Home Goods and they ring the bell for you. It's like, don't ring the bell. It's like, let's be a
Let's just do
community.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for me, like, the more involved in this work I get, like our gardens right now, like we don't have our own space. We're essentially squatters in a sense. Like our first garden was at the Covenant House, which is a homeless shelter for youth ages 18 to 23. And then our second garden was at a community association that had been run over with weeds. And they were like, hey, can you come and help? And I saw 14 raised beds. And I was like, can I help? I was like, I will help. And so I had those. And then the last garden, the newest one that we just created, is in a soup kitchen that has been shut down. It actually got shut down a year ago. And now it's crazy looking at all the homeless in Atlantic City. That's where our gardens are located. And it's like, even in this crisis, there's no plan for those people. So it was like, when you shut down the soup kitchen, you had no idea, like the need was there then. Can you imagine how much more it is now?
I talked
Um,
to someone back in a few, maybe 15, 20, 30 episodes ago, and I was telling them about the homeless population and telling them that it was a problem, and people would literally during wintertime would get arrested just to have a place to stay and have a place to eat, and they didn't believe me.
mhm.
They sat there and said, "That's not true, is it?" I said, "Yes,
Wow.
that people do that." Like, I mean, you like to think of homeless people as expert minimalists. I had one tell me that one time. It totally changed my perspective on things. But
Mm,
it sucks because much like why you started this corporation or organization, I probably can relate to you with the fact is I've walked through my town from when I was a child to where I walk through it now, and it's not the same and it doesn't feel like home. And what I mean
right.
that is because a lot of small businesses have closed down. People that I knew, mom and pop shops, have turned into giant corporations. A Starbucks has completely revamped. Yeah, they redid it and redecorated it and made it look nicer, but a lot of those things, the old school, like our town is known for old school buildings, stuff that was built in like
Mm,
1874, all these types of things. And the brick, like that character, like I always talk about, if I'm getting a house, I want it to be made of like brick or stone or something where you can see the cracks, because those cracks usually have memories of history.
right.
And I find
Yeah.
that to be beautiful. Like when I'm walking, so many times as a kid, like people always talk about, we just got our basketball court paved over, all the cracks are gone. I'm like, but those cracks showed character. I remember how many times I tripped over one of those things and missed a free throw or something.
Oh my gosh, so true. And that's like the other thing, like the other side of it wasn't just like opportunistic. Like I'm the same way. Like I see beauty and like cracks. I'm also a poet. I have a whole separate poetry Instagram page that I only share with like people who are really close to me and a bunch of like strangers. So for me, like connecting and like seeing beauty in small, tiny details is huge. And what led me, I was listening to one of your episodes about, I think the guy was the walnut guy, and it came up, you guys were talking about mental health. And that's actually how I came back into this work, because I was teaching in inner cities for a long time. So I saw like the social issues and the health issues. And I always had compassion for that. Even in undergrad, my undergrad honors thesis was about phototextual documentaries and like, can they actually make social change? So this has been something I thought about for a long time. But when we moved to South Jersey, we moved into a town that was wealthy compared to the towns around it. And I thought, oh, I can put my 4 kids in a school, then they can get a great education. It doesn't matter if it's not diverse, because like I know they'll interact with diversity. I'm half African American and half Jewish. Um, so like my friends are from all over the place. But I've noticed like the more and more I lived here, like I fell into depression, and I'm 40 right now. I went my whole life, I never had any struggle with mental illness at all. And I think I was about 37 years old and I couldn't even get off the couch. I'm like, what is going on? And my therapist, yeah, it's amazing. Like I went to a well visit and I took that HQ9 survey, that I used to make fun of, like, who wants to like drive off a cliff? Like, who fills out this survey and does it, it says yes to these things. Well, I went there and I said yes, all of them, except I wanted to commit suicide. And I was like, holy cow, like what is going on? And my therapist that I found, like literally by Googling that day, I need to talk to somebody, was a social worker in Atlantic City. And he said, you're separated from the work that is closest to your heart. And that's how this whole organization just evolves, like from my own struggles. So it's like,
Well,
yeah.
see, the reason why I'm such a big mental health advocate is because what a lot of people, like I've mentioned a few times, and a few people probably know, but I suffer from severe clinical depression. I'm a big, I love the human brain. I love how it works. I love everything. Like I got really interested into just the neuroscience behind it all, whether it's the chemical, the physical, every single psychology aspect behind it. Um, but when I started this podcast, I mean, when we say ignorance is bliss, ignorance is bliss. I was happy. I mean, I was upset where life was. I felt depressed because I just didn't have anything going for me. But after talking to so many people and soaking up so much information, the reason why I understand, like what my grandpa says, like he at the age of like 85, where he's just like, I'm ready to wrap this shit up. I get it because just from having so
Yeah.
many conversations, I feel like I've aged beyond my years. I look at people that are in
Mm.
their 20s and I don't think like they do. I was always kind of more mature for my age, besides the classic stupid jokes I like to do. But I started to notice, like, I feel like I'm 80 years old mentally. I'm like, let's wrap this shit up because I've just soaked up way too much information. And I remember
Mm.
even taking the test in the doctor's office when he was like, we're doing a depression survey just to make sure we can get some of your symptoms and see, make sure you're not having thing. And they go, do you feel depressed every day, somewhat every day, none at all, or every single day? I'm like, every single day. And then every question they asked was like the basis of that. And it was every day, every day, every day,
That
every day.
was me. That's the
Yeah.
same one I'm talking about. That same survey. I was like, oh my God, every day, every
Yeah.
day.
And
Yeah.
people, what I always try, I've always remembered this, was when I found out a little bit about mental health when I was studying stuff to do with mentally challenged people. I was trying to figure out how the brain was working. There was a book that told me doesn't matter what age you are, or mental health can hit you at any state in your life. You can be 70 and get hit
So
with
true.
depression. People think, oh well, I made it into my 40s, I'm never going to get it. That's not true. Something bad could happen and next thing you know, it's there and you can't get that monkey off your back. It's very, very difficult to. You have to find, which, like yourself, you found a gardening or type of giving back to the community as a form of therapy, because what that form of therapy is taking your mind off of it.
Right, right. It's really interesting. Like I feel like I'm a real passionate advocate for Instagram and in particular, because I find that I have been able to network in, very specific fields of like urban gardens and people who do social service. And I've just found, not just like, I found an amazing village of people that are in the same boat. You know what I'm saying? Like they
Well,
feel wise beyond their years. Like, how do I keep this stamina going when the rest of the world seems like they don't get it? Like they're zombies. It's
they're
really hard.
Well, their Instagram communities. I've been part of the hot sauce community. I've been part of the barbecue community. The ice cream community is a little bit scary to me, but they're just a lot of people that are very, very positive and passionate. But where you'll see this is they're at their early stages. And the bad part is when you go towards like the barbecue community or something, I know it sounds ridiculous naming these communities,
No, not at
but
all.
the barbecue
Just me and that.
community, there's those few people in there that have maybe 7,000 followers, 6,000 followers, and they start to lose their aspect of being human, and they think that they're too good for a lot of things.
Right,
That's
right.
where the community starts to get tainted. If you come to the podcast community, you're going to see a lot more than anything else, because we're media, basically. For a lot of people, everybody's doing the same type of thing, whether it's true crime, storytelling, all these types of things. And it becomes down to where Facebook started turning out for a while. It's just people talking shit on each other. Before it
Yeah,
was
for real.
you would connect with your family, you would post pictures of your family, you would do stuff with your family. Then it started becoming a place for people making comments on other people's stuff, people judging other people, which it is now. But also now it's also like what I call a graveyard for depression. It's where people just go there to complain about their problems.
Yeah.
It's
But then it becomes like, I don't know, like other issue that I have is like, I really do feel like my screen time is part of like, that's something I need to break. I mean, I'm also a yoga teacher. I've taken 500 hours class, I have my 500 hours certification, and I know the power of meditation and yoga and unplugging. But at the same time, like part of our organization, we also run farmers markets. Um, So like I need that social media platform for the events and to like connect people. So like it's difficult to like not get pulled from like the work part of it to into like all that other stuff because of the nature of my work and the nature of who I am. A, I love to argue. B, I am so into politics, but the other thing is I have that personal connection. Like it's one thing to talk about welfare as an ideal, you know, and it's another thing when you know people that can't get it because they had, they had a conviction of, selling a controlled deadly substance 25, 30 years ago, and they still can't get public housing, even though they've never been arrested again. Like when I talk from experience, it's like people don't even know like what to do because they're just parroting what they've heard on the news. So that's another like source of depression, like because I'm like, you just don't get it. Like I wish you could just come out and be with these people with me and you would understand a lot more. So yeah, it's like a catch-22 in a lot of ways.
Well, life is just really crazy because it's pretty tricky. I mean, it's like it's one of those
So
boggled up
true.
it's one of those boggled up mysteries. I know it sounds corny to say, and we're all trying to figure
No,
it
it
out. And
doesn't.
I don't even at my age, I have no clue what I want to do. I don't even know if this is it. I don't know what it is. Honestly, if you offered me $1,000,000, what I'd do is just build a log cabin out in the middle of the woods somewhere and try and isolate away from everybody because I like talking to people, but I like doing it one on one only because it's so interesting to get that person in a conversation. Because if you're in a group with your friends, you're going to act completely different. If you're around other people, you're going to act completely different. I've started to notice that people are at the point now where they rather, if like just not really talk at all to each other. I mean, it's so much easier to do self checkout. I'm at fault for that too. I do it too. But when I ask you how your day's going, when I get into a conversation with you as a person, I am legit 100% here. My phone is turned off. I'm in, it's completely away from me. I'm isolated from it because I know what it means to be there and have a true connection with something. Even
Mhm.
if I'm not interested in whatever you're talking about, I'm still going to talk to you like a person. I'm going to give you my thoughts, my feelings. And at one point in our history, this wasn't a rare thing. This was something we did every day. We
Right.
did it with people in our family. Back in the day, bullying stopped at school. Now it goes home with you. Now it's on
Right.
the internet. And that's a problem for you're seeing ages of kids that are 7 to 12 years old that are experiencing severe depression. And
Committing suicide at age 12. Like, I don't even know if I knew what that was at age 12.
It's it's very, very scary, especially if you're a parent. I can understand your perspective behind that, just taking away all electronics. But it's just because whenever we get a good thing as people, we tend to make it sour, and we're starting to see that a little bit with the Earth. The Earth is starting to kind of fight back. People are saying only because we've beaten the living hell out of it, and we haven't really given it a chance to really, or at least a lot of us haven't given a chance for to try to care about it. The reduce, reuse, recycle, all these other types of things that came out. That's a lot of people doing that, but not compared to most. Most people still want to throw their trash outside the window because it's easier than having that in their car.
Yeah, but you know what's so interesting is like, part of the issue that my organization C.R.O.P.S like tries to handle is like this idea of urban blight and how like, you don't want to, who wants to wake up and walk outside and look at trash and look at it burnt out buildings that nobody bothers to knock down. And what I've found is that it's interesting. I get asked a lot of questions like, oh, well, how are you going to put up a garden there in that neighborhood? Aren't people going to steal your vegetables? And I find that such a funny question. Like, but they're not my vegetables. Like, I put them in there, but they're not for me. They're for them. I said, if they, somebody came and like cut the collard greens because they knew that the frost was coming. Like, I find people in the neighborhood know more about the vegetables than I do. I've been taught so much. Like, collard greens are a perfect example. Like, of course, I have African American roots. So I remember growing up eating collard greens. I remember, you put the neck bones in it. Like, I know that history. I'm a vegetarian now, but, I met a man and I was trying to show him. He came into the garden. He was like 75, 80 years old, and he has a bag with him. I hope he doesn't listen in and be like, I'm not 75, I'm 68, but whatever, around that age. That would be me. Wait, hold up. So anyway, but like I was like, oh, well, when you cut collards, you cut from the outside And then this way it can grow up again in the middle. And he looks at me and he goes, girl, I know you're not telling me how to cut no collard greens. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Like, what do you mean? And he starts telling me this story about, collard greens come from when slaves grew them. The first pick was, let's see if I can get this right now, because I know a historian will probably, correct me on this. But I guess it's the first one is the one that goes to the pigs, the first cutting, and then the second one they take, or vice versa, something like that. But it has a history of like, because they were sweeter, so he knew to cut and they come again, but the second time that's like the good time, or that's the time for the pigs. Like, so there's a whole history to why we do certain things. And it's not that I don't have any knowledge. That I go to farming conferences like crazy. My mom laughs still. Like, she was like, when I was in high school, I wouldn't touch a bug. I would scream. I wouldn't go in the garden. I didn't grow up hiking or camping or any of that stuff. So it's really cool that, I found farming, way after all of all of the different permutations that my life and turns my life has taken. It's like just to open the door for so many people and say, hey, this is the way you think your life was going to go, but why don't you try this? Like, I hear so many times people like, I don't have a green thumb. And I'm like, mine's not green either. So let's try this together,
Well, it's the same
So,
thing. I've talked to
yeah.
so many ecologists and all these people that study ecology and, get a degree on it and do all these things. And next thing you know, they're just like, but we still go to farmers to get a lot of our techniques and research and ideas and studies from. I'm like, because you can understand the book smarts behind something, but when you start getting involved in something, you understand the same process, but just in a different way. Like farmers learning that if you till the land a certain way, next thing you know, it helps with crop growth. Well, studying that in a book shows the same thing, but explained in a completely different way. I mean,
Yeah.
I truly understood agriculture and how hard it is, and really compliment anybody that's willing to do it. When I built a fish pond, that shit took me, I don't even know, like 3
Yeah.
good weeks of the summer. And then, it just kept getting ruined and ruined and ruined. And then I get this nice fish pond built. We go and drive an hour away to go get fish, me and my buddy. And then by the time we get back, we throw the fish in the water. And my buddy goes, what's happening to them? I go, what? He goes, what is that in the water? I'm like, I threw chlorine in there to clean up the water. He goes, are you kidding me? He goes, you
Oh
just murdered our
no.
fish. And then we had to redrain it and do all this other stuff in it. But you live and you learn.
Yes. Yeah, you can't be afraid to make mistakes. Like, that's what's so key. Like, I talk at a lot of colleges, at college courses, and I tell them that. Because, in college, people say a lot like, oh, well, I'm an English major, or I'm an education major. And I'm like, well, just study, like, just absorb, because the things that I, learned in dinosaur class, even though I was an English major, they still apply when I'm reading books to my kids. It's like, just be a lifelong learner, be open to learning, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. Like, another great story about the Covenant House. This one girl goes, they were excited about the carrots, and carrots take an enormous amount of time to grow. They're like 90 days. Radishes are like 25 to 30. So these things take 90 days. You got to wait a long time. It's a lot of patience. So she looks at me and goes, are they ready yet? And I'm like, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Really don't know. And she's like, you don't know? I'm like, I don't. So why don't you pull one up and see what happens? And she's like, but what if it's not ready? I'm like, then, we'll wait for the rest of them. you know like, and she pulled it out of the ground. It was short, it was really stubby, and she was like, oh, I went to shove it back in the ground. Like, well, it doesn't work that way. But it was such a great learning experience. Like, why not? Like, people are so afraid, and I think, it's like fixing your house. Like, HGTV makes it like everything has to look perfect. Like, give it a try. Like, nobody, so few people even go over each other's houses anymore. What does it matter if your floor is like, perfect wood, or like, you have a granite countertop? Like, who cares? Why do we buy into that stuff?
Well, what's weird is the fact that even with all the free time we're starting to have, we're starting to see people that are involved in the farming thing a little bit more, or at least trying to get like a plant and
Yeah.
learn how to grow. I've talked to so many chili pepper growers. I've talked to so many ecologists or farmers that are really trying to understand this thing because it's turning into a new hobby. But I don't know. As people, we can do it for ourselves, but we won't do it to our community, which is like, it's really weird because there's a strange amount, like, I mean, for you, what you do in your nonprofit, for instance, That's not very, very common. That's very, very rare because people rather do things to improve their own living rather than improve everyone else around them. My
Well,
uncle,
interestingly enough, yeah, I just want to speak to this specifically before I forget. So, our first farmers market that I started is in the town that's wealthier, right? So, then when I started to do projects in Atlantic City with some of the money that we raised, like I don't say this to anyone, and now I guess it's out there in public, but like I kind of think along the Robin Hood method. That's how I thought in the beginning. Like, okay, I'll put a farmer's market here where people can afford to pay the prices for local goods. I mean, they're handmade stuff. It's expensive, right? So usually farmers markets, traditionally in smaller, like, not talking New York City. New York City is different, or like Boston or something like that. But like other farmers markets, it's more of like a bougie community because you have to have enough money to pay those prices, right? Like $20 for a pie. So I do that. And then I go, okay, with the money I raised, I'm going to put some gardens in Atlantic City. And then the people I was originally working with were like, we don't care about Atlantic City. Like, don't you think if you raise money in this town, don't you think you should only have projects in this town? I'm like, there's nowhere in our founding documents of this nonprofit that said anything about confining our work to one neighborhood. So then when the garden started at the Covenant House, I started a garden internship. So the people working in the garden who were homeless youth, right? Then they would take their vegetables and the flowers, they made flower arrangements, and then brought them to the wealthier community. And you know what? There was no backlash. In fact, our donation bucket quadrupled in size. People love talking to these young people about, they're like, wait, you grew this in Atlantic City? So what actually happened is I didn't rob anything from anybody to give to somebody else. They both actually give to each other just as much. Does that make sense? Like, I think that speaks to exactly what you're talking about. Like, it's not just one community.
yeah, well, people look at it like, your family is barely part of your community. It's part of your small social group. We like to think of our community as us, basically. If you don't talk to someone on an everyday basis, they're not like you. Even your neighbors, it's easier to just go inside your house, lock the door, rather than talk to your neighbors. But like same thing with my buddy. My buddy, his mom grows vegetables and all these things, and she always plants me a few. Well, I'm more than happy to go over there and grow vegetables with them and actually put in a lot of work to make their garden good because I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to take care of it. Last time I had a tomato plant, I was like 15 years old. I left for 2 days and it died. That's me when it comes to my own crops, but when it comes to doing it with somebody else's, I'm more than happy to put in any amount of work. I mean, I've been to places where I'll see people like what's interesting now, like you go to schools or something in like kindergarten and first grade, they're having them do outdoor, what people would say,
Yeah.
oh, that's labor or that's child labor. It's like, no, they're planning. That's their gardening. They're learning an essential skill that we should all learn how to do by growing our own crops. We would probably benefit a lot more
Right.
than just going to a store and get something that's pumped with pesticides.
Well, it's interesting too to watch people's lawns fall apart now because they don't have the services, can't come around. Like, how many people don't own lawnmowers? They don't know what to do with their grass. You know what I'm saying? We're like, before, like our house looked terrible because we take care of it ourselves. It's not perfectly manicured, like every edge. It's a living and breathing organism, my yard. I have tomatoes in the front yard. I have flowers, I have all kinds of stuff. And now it's like people are looking over like, hey, maybe there is another way. So one of the things I've done during this lockdown with the virus, I put together pots that I had in my garage because I'm a hoarder, and soil. And I put seed packets in and put them in a plastic bag, tied them up, and dropped them off in Atlantic City. And then I went on Instagram and made a video and was like, hey, this is what, if you want to pick up a pot with some seeds, I'll teach you how to do it. So I've been teaching through tutorials, and I put out 10 as a trial and all of them went. So now that's the next step, is I'm growing all these seedlings so that I can put the pots out there and even buckets, like potatoes, and just get it started for people and then be there for support. And I'm always there like, hey, if something's dying or you need some help, call me. And if it doesn't work out, come pick up another one. And it's another way to pay it forward, where it's like we can't gather it in the garden like we used to, but we can still be a community.
You just gave me a crazy idea for a movie.
Oh,
So it's gonna have to star someone famous. So I'm thinking Leonardo DiCaprio or Matthew McConaughey in it. But
Good move.
imagine if every person's life was connected to a tree or a plant, and you'd have to plant that thing and you have to take care of it as long as you were alive, basically. You know, you don't have to do it every single day, but when you water that tree and let it thrive and grow, it grows. So you would take care of it like it was an extension of yourself, and then the world will become healthier.
That's really cool. But then what happens when you die? Like, do you chop it down and throw it in the grave with you?
When you die, the tree dies.
Ah.
There's no like chopping it down. There's like that matrix connection where it's like linked to
Oh,
you.
so it just like whoom, right back down. I see that. I like that.
Exactly.
That's a
And
good
then that
idea.
means if someone tries to tear down where your tree's planted to build a pool or build a community that looks exactly like the community next to it, even though that community is not even, there's nobody living in it. Which I will
Mm.
say that's a real example because my buddy lived out in the nice countryside, and 6 months later, there were houses that we got lost for 2.5 hours on one street.
Mm.
One street. It was one of those community neighborhoods, but every damn
Yeah,
house looked the
looks
exact
exactly the
same.
same.
We were skating. We didn't know where to go. We went left. Next thing you know, it was like being stuck in one of those like dreams where you just can't escape. Like you just pop out the corner. Like we were
Yeah.
just
Well,
here.
that's what Edward Scissorhands was exactly about that.
Felt like I
Did
was
you
in
ever
the
see that movie?
yeah. It
Oh, you
scared
got
the
to watch
living
that.
crap
Johnny
out of
Depp.
me.
Yeah, he's scary because he arrives in this neighborhood and like now it makes total sense to me because I'm pretty much Edward Scissorhands, like showing up and people like, who is she? Like people kept asking me, like, where'd you come from? Like, do you actually live here? Like, yeah, I live here, you know?
Well, it's
Someone
weird.
asked me, wait, you're black and Jewish? Like, how does that even happen? I'm like, oh, like, how do you even ask that question? You want me to
How
draw you a
does
diagram?
how
It's
does
not
that
appropriate.
how does that get brought up unless you're introducing yourself like, hi, my name's Paige, I'm black and Jewish? I'm like, whoa, wait
People
a
ask
second.
me all the time. People all the time. They're like, wait, what are you? Like, when I was a kid, I guess nobody really wanted to ask. So then, like, I had friends that knew me for like years and years. And then they would see my parents together at the same time. And then they would go, oh,
My
oh,
buddy,
what? They're like,
my
oh.
my buddy always used to go like, dude, you're Jewish. I'm like, why? He's like, dude, you have your nose. I'm pretty sure it's your nose. I'm like, my nose isn't even that big. What are you talking about? And he goes, dude, you're Jewish. And then I took the ancestry.com, but I took an actual like blood test where you had to go get it scanned. I actually do.
Okay.
Part of my genetics is from Israel, and I'm also 3% Nigerian. So, I mean,
Wow. See, we are all connected, whether people like it or not. And I also find it funny, like people, like I always call myself mixed, but like people are way more mixed than I am. Like I only have like 3 or 4 like nationalities in me, you know, like there are people with a lot more. And but they're if your skin looks a certain color, then you're mixed. Like I don't get
see,
that. It's weird.
I like that we can have that individual difference. I guess like people can be like, hey, well, I'm also part Czechoslovakian or something. That's cool.
Mm,
But I
it
really,
is
really
interesting.
hate how we take it in the main thing when it becomes like so racist a little bit. Like I believe the only thing you
Yeah.
should have on your census when it should be like your race box, it should just say I'm a robot or I am not a robot, because that's the only question I care about. I want to know if the person taking the test next to me is robotic, because I want to know what I'm supposed to be scared of when Skynet takes over.
That's true. That's true.
I
They
mean,
should have a scanner in the mail.
exactly. But I'm saying that tree movie, that's a good idea. I'm telling you, get Leonardo
I like that
DiCaprio.
idea.
I'm telling you. We
And
could
you know what? He's not busy right now.
exactly.
He has no
Everyone's
work.
on lockdown. There you go.
This is the time to pitch your movie ideas, you know, to everybody who's at home.
This is a weird time because they have this thing going on right now called social distancing, but everybody's still outside, but they're just staying like 6 feet away from their own family members. I'm like, this is really, really weird. It's not bringing us to, I feel like it's like, you know, when they say you don't know what you have until it's gone, that's what it
Mm,
is. Like people don't know what it
yeah.
means to hug a family member now because like they don't have that ability to, so now they really want to do it.
You know what though? Like I'm really excited. This is totally twisted, but like I'm excited to watch people become natural looking. You know, like you can't go to a barber, you can't go to a hair salon, you can't get nails, you can't get eyelashes, you can't, you know, you can't dye
I
your
don't
hair
even
unless
have toilet
you
paper.
order it. Yeah. I want to watch, I want to see the world like go like Neanderthal a little bit and just
What's
chill the heck out.
What's weird is it's only gonna last 2 weeks after this whole thing is over. That's what's
Right. And
really
everyone will,
crappy.
and I don't know. I was watching, I saw this post by a local hair salon, and it was like, we're excited to see you when this is all over. Don't use box hair color. And I really was like confused about that. Like, is that going to wreck your hair? Should I be like, am I being dishonest or disloyal to like my hairdresser if I do my own hair like during this time? Like, that's weird. And how long should you like not do that?
It's
Like,
why I don't trust makeup. I don't like a girl that wears makeup because I feel like you're lying to me. I know that sounds stupid, but when I wake up
yeah,
next to you and I look over and you don't have any makeup on, I'm going to be upset because I'm like, you have a freckle? I didn't know that was there. Where the hell did that come from? Like, I know that sounds selfish, but it's like, I feel like I'm being tricked. Show me you. You know what I mean? Like, we live in this world now where we got to judge people based on their appearance. There's people that are influencers based on their looks, where you have to live up to these accommodations. I have a 6-pack, but guess what? I tell you, it's works way too hard to get it, and it also is not fun trying to keep it for the past 7 years now. It's not, I constantly care what people think about me look wise, but you know what? We all do that. We all make these slight judgments of other people. I think we need to lose that as a human race, because back in the day, we used to care and really kind of help each other out, and not really give a shit about, anybody's differences or things. But now we judge people based on their differences. And I think that's
right.
just,
And also, yeah, I feel like too, like we like even the more so than judging other people is the harmful way we look at ourselves. Because like whenever, I don't know about you, or like, because I fight with this my whole life, like when I'm criticizing other people in my mind, it's really a criticism of myself. Like, oh, I can't believe she did this, this, or that. And like the undercurrent story really is like, why can't I do that too? And if people could just recognize that and just love themselves, and if you want to be better at something, just be better, just do more of it. That's all.
I think
Leave
I've
other people out of it.
I've changed from when I used to think, like, I used to criticize what people do. Now I just look at people like from an aspect of like, I see people freak out in the store and I just call them out on their shit. I learned to just not really have a filter in scenarios like that. Like, I'll be at a store and I watched a guy just screaming at a woman, and like, like, I was trying to get her bank card out to pay for something. And she was obviously of elderly age and she was taking a while, and obviously everybody's getting frustrated, but he just started snapping and I was like, bro, do you really have to act like a fucking asshole? And he just like looked at me like, what'd you just say? And I was like, did I stutter? I'm not trying to be an asshole either and yell at you, but come on, man. We're all waiting here patiently. We all have places to go. I understand if you're having a hard time, but don't be a dick. And he just looked at me
Yeah.
like, all right, man, you're lucky. You're lucky. I'm like, lucky for what? What am I? I'm literally, and
Yeah.
people will grab you and tell you not to say something like, hey, don't say that. Don't say that. I'm like, why? We're all trying to survive in this world right now. If anybody is really concerned about somebody taking too long to take their bank card out, let me throw this into your mind. We are all on a giant rock right now, floating through space at like 1,000,000 miles an hour, and nobody's paying attention to it. Technically, we're all giant bags of blood. Just put that in your
Right.
head. Just think, the fact that we can walk out into the world and organs or whatever don't spill out onto the ground, I keep that in my head because that makes me rationalize with everybody around me and makes me not freak out in giant scenarios. But I will admit, if you are on your cell phone while you are driving, I will snap. I don't know. That was a long rant. I'm sorry.
It's all good. I think we all have long rants sometimes. It's true. It gets like pent up, and you're like, oh,
Well,
I feel that though, because it's like the amount of social pressure to keep your opinion to yourself is crazy. But then the people who don't pay attention to that are some of the worst horrible people ever. Like, why
like,
do you get to say it, but I don't give myself permission to say it? And what I'm saying is actually kind, and what you're saying is sucks. Like,
well,
it's
it's
not
like,
fair.
it's also a lot of misunderstanding that we get through social media. See, the bad part is your phone, it does not sense emotion, and it's really hard to sense somebody's emotion through a text. Me telling
Yeah.
you that like I need to start now or I need to do this now can come off in a jerky tone. Then you find out that the way I really tried to convey it was like, oh, I just need to start now. Like it's a sincere type thing. I've seen on
Mm-hmm.
Facebook somebody puts up a post like, this is crazy. I can't believe all this is happening to me. And then people are like, you understand what's going on in the world? Are you that so much of a jerk or you're that so much of this? And I'm like looking, I'm like, do you read that person's post and do you think that they're just being selfish? Or have you talked to that person and found out that they're just really upset about what's going on and that their life is going to crap? And then they're like, oh, I didn't think of it that way. I'm like, because you don't think before you say something.
Right.
You don't understand what people are probably going through. People will reach out to you if you show everybody that you're super, super depressed. But as people, we need to figure out how to kind of sense that a little bit. I mean, when I walk
Yeah.
past somebody, I can tell if somebody's in a really bad mood. It's just called having a thing of empathy.
Yeah, and it's also context. Like, like on Facebook, like there's no context. Like I know I use not even just Facebook, like I used to blog pretty regularly. And it was during a time in my life, like I was homeschooling my three kids, were very close in age and young. And my father passed away that year. So it was like my way of, processing things. And what I found is that I didn't realize, but I was making people feel bad because I was able to be home and homeschool my kids for preschool. So they were in the woods, they were on the beach, and even my tone, like I take responsibility, like, oh, this should be the way things are. Like kids should be able to be outside. And I didn't think about like the other side where people are reading this going like, shit, I wish I didn't have to work. I wish I could be outside. Like I'm a bad mom. Oh, I should do more hands-on activities. Like I should have rice trays and like themed whatevers. And I was like, the most popular post I ever wrote was after I got involved in some political work, and I went to Trenton and I spoke, and then I petitioned the commissioner of education for his job. It was kind of a dramatic thing. And I came home and I took a picture of my kitchen, and it was like a disaster, right? Shit all over the place. So I posted that and I was just like, yeah, social activists losing at home today or something like that. And it went wild because people were like, oh my God, you're human. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm like, I could post this shit all day. Like, look at this room, look at that room. Like, my kids are eating like crackers for dinner because I didn't go food shopping today. It's like, I've learned like just being real with people, even online, is like the biggest relief that you can give people,
Well,
give them some context.
it's even really hard. Like a lot of people follow famous actors or follow famous people on Instagram. They're constantly posting things that make you jealous or make you just like, I want that. I want this. I can't believe I don't have that. And miserable. And it's like, follow real people. I follow real bodybuilders, not the fake ones you see that are all photoshopped. They show you like I try and show people with like a 6-pack picture. I'll show them a before and after. Like, here's me when I haven't eaten anything. I'm at the gym and I'm shredded because I worked out for 2 hours. Then here's me after I eat food and the 6-pack is basically gone. It's showing people that
Mm-hmm.
like, you need to understand that we like to show ourselves in the best of light, and that's not us 100% of the time. That's why I like, actresses and actors that'll go out without makeup or go out like in the morning with sweatpants on. They look like crap and not care if the paparazzi's
Yeah.
taking pictures of them.
My little brother sent me a video, and it was funny because he sent me a message and he's like, you got to watch like Serena Williams's like story. And I'm like, okay, Greg, like, all right, yeah, I'll get right on that. And I rolled my eyes and I was like, something about her, like, oh, what did he say? He said like her makeup routine or something like that. I was like, why would I care what Serena Williams is doing with her, makeup? So anyway, I was so bored because I've been home all day. I was like, you know what? Let me see what it is. So I put it on, and it was hysterical because she was in her dress in her bathroom. It looked like a dressing room, but like she had her little daughter in front of her, and she's like, this is my midday like face routine. I wash my face with the soap, and the little girl is standing there with like her lipstick just drawing all over her face. It was just like, it was the cutest thing ever because Serena looks down and she was just like, yeah. And this is how she does her makeup. Like, it was so real and it was so beautiful. And I'm like, I love seeing the celebrities like this right now, like it just makes every like it softens. It's like that soft focus of like the 50s. It's like it's not all of that. Calm down, people. Like, live your life, connect. give some context, that's
It's that
all.
showing that you're human, that we all kind of need. We need to see that people are all human, but we lose that aspect because fame or money or something puts them in like different odds than us. And I'm like, no, I treat everybody with the same amount of respect. You talk to me the same way, I treat everybody on basically on the same level. You treat me with respect, I treat you with respect back. And it's the same thing, like why I admire poetry so much. Well, I'm gonna ask you about some of your poetry, but I also, which I don't really tell a lot of people, I think I've mentioned a few times in the podcast, is I write poetry as well. For a guy, that's a little bit strange. I always used to get a lot of crap for it when I would like ever tell anybody. It was very secretive of it. But even right here, like as I'm talking to you, I'm grabbing my poetry notebook right now. Like I have a giant book that, when I get frustrated or when I, sometimes like I'm an insomniac. So like just this morning it was raining out. I opened up the window and just sat here in the complete darkness and just started writing poetry. And I remember when I first I told my cousin about it. He bought me this book, and he said, I actually wrote down the quote on the first page. It says, "When something comes out of your mind, like out of the blank, write that shit down." And I put
Love
that in
it.
my book because that's when we were talking about the podcast and all these types of things that were going on. Like this was just kind of starting. And he got me this book. He was like, you need to start writing down your thoughts because we would try and write songs together. I come from a music family.
Hmm.
Every time a song comes to me, it comes in like what I would call like a bit of poetry. It would come like with like in different types of God, what is that thing called? It's like 3-2-1 or 3-3-2 or something. Oh man,
Hmm.
it's type
Oh,
of
a
poetry.
haiku.
Yeah, it
Haiku.
comes.
Yeah.
That's how songs come to me. Like I'll be like, if you're talking about like creating up a random lyric, I'll say it in the ways of that, like more of like a rap rather than a um like actual lyric, like singing it. And so I just started writing a lot of stuff down, and like I wrote stuff about the world, just things I started to observe about a lot of stuff because we're missing key details in life. Like if you would have asked me 5 years ago to go to a slam poetry, I would have said no. I would have been like, "Are you kidding me? Do I need to hear about the world is burning? Like, do I need to? No, no, no. I don't need to do that."
Ding.
But I
Yeah.
would love to go to one now because I mean, even orchestras I'll go to now because I'm starting to understand that you need to experience every little bit of life because you never know what key it might unlock to a door you never knew you had.
So true. And I will say, like, I just discovered your podcast literally when you liked one of our posts the other day. And I really appreciated like when I was scrolled through like the pictures on Instagram. And I was like, this is like literally people from all walks of life, like all different things. It was just really it's special because a lot of podcasts, I mean, I don't listen to all that many, so the few that I've listened to, um only because I don't know why, I absolutely love them, I just don't make time for it. I guess I should stop scrolling Facebook and working
I wish
into the
someone
wee
could
hours of the
implant
night.
headphones into my ears because I always have headphones on when I walk around, so I just constantly listen to podcasts. But I
Yeah,
mean,
you learn so much. Like I stopped listening to music when I run on the treadmill. Like I just put on podcasts. And even my kids, like we've been listening to Spilled Milk a lot. Have you seen that one where they just sit and eat food and then talk about like the history of food? But they really just two people having a conversation like this. Like they'll talk about like Pop Tarts. They're like, so what's your first Pop Tart memory? And then like they go down memory lane and
that
they
sounds like all the questions I ask food reviewers on here. I'm like, what's your donut memory? What's your pizza memory? It's a good question because you have a link to those
yeah.
certain foods. Like what I started to notice, like all these people that start doing certain hashtags or create their Instagram profile reviewing food or doing a certain type of thing, like there's a distinct thing why you latched onto that. There's something there that was in your life or in your child, like environmental influence is something you learn in psychology that, hooks onto you and stuff. I'm in no way a psychologist. What I try and tell people is my podcast, before actually this was going to be out of the blank, I was thinking about doing one of those ASMR of just eating Raisin Bran, but like the parts, hear me out. It's like you would hear like, but it would be like it would dry cereal. So you would just hear someone crunching into the microphone. And then like when those Raisin Bran chunks get stuck in your throat and you go like do the cough, that was going to
Right.
be in there. And then I was going to like joke around. But then when I turned it into this was what I started to notice was that there was people all over that had a podcast. I mean, there's about 3% of podcasters that have something like mine, but they're not the same because, well, they're not me, but at the same time, they do interviews with people that are famous comedians. They do things with people that have something and a certain achievement, a certain, like I had a
Right.
dude on my podcast before, a good episode you should look up. His name's Arthur Camberg. Me and him, we're basically a host of the same thing. My podcast is conversations with people. His podcast is conversations with people in their 20s who have made an achievement in their life. And it was like two hosts kind of battling for host space, but it was like, it's just conversation. I don't care if you have 1,000,000 degrees, which I've had people send me their information, be like, I have all these degrees. Can I do your podcast? I'm like, you could freaking have $1 to your name. I don't care. You can come do my podcast because it doesn't take an education. It doesn't take anything, just to talk and have a conversation.
Yeah, for sure. And, it's funny. I really appreciate this opportunity because a lot of times, I get invited to classes to talk about like C.R.O.P.S and like what I do. And, it's just grown so much that it's like an arduous task, like a difficult task to do. Like it's like hard to wrap my mind around it because it's like a spider. But I feel like even through our conversation, like the heart of it has come out. Like I just like to connect people to their spaces and to one another and to other people's spaces. That's pretty much it.
Well, it's like even for me, when I reach out to do guests and stuff, people, like, if I'd be like, hey, check out my podcast or something, they'll message me and be like, so what's your podcast about? I'm like, why don't you just check it out? I know that sounds like I'm being a jerk a bit, but it's like I get so tired of just telling everybody over and over and over and over and over again the same exact thing. It's the same thing probably with you, explaining so much over and over and over again. You start to cut it up and do it so it comes out like in less time, so you can say it in a minute rather than it taking 5 minutes to explain.
That's what they say in nonprofit world. They say you should have like a 2-minute elevator speech. I don't think I have it yet. But what I like to say to people is like very similar to what you just said. Like, why don't you just come? Like, just come. Come to one of our community days and see what it's like. Like
I'm the worst. All my friends that I guest on their podcast or just have fun. They're like, all right, well, Robbie, tell everybody about your podcast. I'm like, it's out of the blank. Look it up. They're like, don't you want to tell everybody where it's at? I'm like, if they honestly give a shit, they're going to Google it. I mean, you can Google it. It'll pop up. Like, what else am I supposed to tell you to? Oh, check out my links on this. It's like, if you really give two craps about being on it or even wanting to listen to it, rather than asking me to send you the information. I actually have been cussed out by someone I offered to because they had a farm or something. I was like, oh, I'd love to get you on the podcast. Can you send me your links? It's called Out of the Blank. You can just look it up. Oh, well, fuck you. You think you're all high and mighty? I'm like, oh, you're crazy. I'm sorry. Like,
never mind.
That
Yeah.
does happen because I reach out to a lot of
Yeah.
people, but at the same time, like, it could have been the day that they're having. I try and keep
Well,
that in mind
I
too.
get people say to me, well, what's your website? I'm like, I haven't made one yet. Like, I've been thinking about it for a few years.
I just like it where they're like,
you want to make it for me? That would be great.
hey,
I'm busy.
I'll take a shot. It's going to take a bit, but I'm sure I can get it down. I mean, I've started people's sites. I brought people to start their own
I have
podcasts.
outlines. I have a lot of like, those black and white marble composition books. Like
Yeah.
I've got my co-president, Lisa, she cracks me up. She's like, how many things actually, I think this is one of our interns. She's like, how many things are in that bag right now? Like this bag I carry around, it says, may the metaphors be with you. Kind of like, may the force be with you, because I'm a nerd.
Metaphors.
And yeah. So I don't even know why. I actually hate the bag. I think it's ugly as I don't know why, but I'm too busy and lazy or whatever to like get another bag. That's like the story of my life. So I go in there and I'm like, yeah, I think I have like 3 notebooks. I actually had 7 notebooks in there and 7 folders and then random stuff that didn't make it in either place. Like I got pulled over the other day because my inspection sticker was 7 months overdue. Is that what they call that? Like expired?
Yeah.
And the cop was like, is there something wrong with the card? I'm like, no. He goes, it doesn't cost any money and it takes like 5 minutes. And I was like, yeah, well, I was trying my luck and I guess it's up today. So he goes, can you find your registration? I'm like, open the glove compartment and all this stuff falls out on the floor, on the dirt and the seeds and everything else. And I'm like, my life is kind of crazy. So then he asked me something else and I opened my wallet and it's jam-packed with about 50 business cards. And he was like, just go get your car inspected. Get out of here. And I was like, see?
I would have
worked in my
laughed if you
favor.
opened up your glove box and a giant thing of dirt just pops out. And you're like, the guy's just like, what are you doing? Collected dirt off the side of the road. You're like, it's samples, man. It's samples.
I actually last summer, I grew seeds on my car mat because I drank a lot of coffee, and I spilled the coffee, and apparently seeds can grow on coffee. So I had enough dirt and enough liquid from the coffee and the seeds, and they started to sprout on the car mats. Like, that's amazing, I think.
I learned something about planting that there used to be a plant outside of like my back porch on this house I used to live in for like 3 or 4 years when I was like 7 to I think 11. I kept peeing on it every single day after school because I would play basketball in the backyard, so I would just pee on it.
Right.
This thing grew. I don't even know. It was literally this one like little tiny thing, maybe the size of like your hand, and the leaf was pretty big. This thing grew the size of like a person,
Yeah.
and it was huge. And my grandmom's like, "Man, that plant's really growing." And I'm like, "I don't know what it
I
could
don't know
be."
what happened.
It was, I don't know what I was drinking. I'm pretty sure it was a combination of Mountain Dew and like salt and vinegar potato chips, but that plant grew freaking huge.
Yo, I'm trying that. I'm gonna put pea, Mountain Dew, potato chips in a sprayer and put it on like the plants. We actually had this discussion today. One of the women, Nefertiti, who works with me, she sent me this article or like whatever, this link on Instagram, and it's like it said Black girls with plants or something, and she was like in her house with all these little seedlings. So I wrote back and I said, "Oh, that's what my house looks like. I've got all these plants sprouting and like egg cartons." She was like, "No, you didn't read it." So I'm like, "Oh." So I go back and click on it, and she's talking about how she puts her menstrual blood in the plants because it helps them grow. So then we had this whole conversation. She's like, "So you do that too?" I'm like, "No, I don't." I was like, "But it kind of makes sense because it has a lot of like nutrients." But then I was like, well, people would think that was so gross, but they put cow manure on plants. Like, you actually put another animal's like waste, but you won't put like your own. Like, it's very interesting to me what's disgusting and what's not. Weird.
My buddy had a rose bush outside of his steps by his house that was like growing, so they had the stick attached to it and everything to help it stay up straight and stuff. And
Yeah.
for like a whole entire year, I remember like we would go to the store at like 1 o'clock in the morning and get those like 2 for $4 monsters or something, the energy drinks. And
Yeah.
so I was over his house like every single day, and I would drink like 3 or 4 of them or something. And I would every time, like when it got to the bottom of the can, I would just before I went up to his house or after when I was leaving his house, I would just dump it out on top of the plant. Next thing I know, his freaking rose bush was huge. I was like, dang, I mean, if that's the key to it, then I'll just start feeding a bonsai tree some energy drinks and see where it goes from there.
Yeah, it's like you think about it, like, so when people say like, "Oh, I don't know how to grow anything," or like they have some experience, like their tomato plant died when they were 6 years old, like, okay, try again. Like, I had a lot
Just
of
pee on
things.
it. Just pee on it.
Pee on it, throw some like waste on it, or like, just try again, because I've had plenty of things that didn't work out. Like there's a lot of things I planted that I killed.
If you pee too much on too many plants, if everybody started doing that, it would turn into the movie The Happening, where the plants are like, just fuck you, like stop peeing on us, we're gonna kill you now. Like that's what it would
Yeah.
turn into.
Little Shop of Horrors, like, they've come back.
Well,
True. Let's not do that.
well, Paige, I really appreciate you coming out and doing the podcast. I really want to give you here a minute at the end to be able to promote your page and your organization to where people can find your content.
All right, sounds great. So like I said, our website isn't functional right now, but it's coming. It will be cropsnj.org. But right now, you can find us on Instagram at cropsnj. You can find us on Facebook at Crops or Crops Markets. Yeah, and my secret poetry page is Fly By Poetry. So if you're interested in that, I also have some photography there as well. So yeah, thank you so much for having me and for being persistent, because I'm always like, "Oh yeah, okay, we'll do it," and you're like, "Okay, how about today? How about an hour earlier?" So I appreciate that, and this was a really great experience.
Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode Out of the Blank podcast, and stay tuned for our next episode.